Chapter 3. We were humming down the highway in a white 15-passenger van, with the last two rows of seats removed and an air mattress slapped down in the back to make it more inviting. There were Charlie Brown bedsheets and two stuffed animals, identical smoky hound dogs. At the moment, it was just Carl and me, the unhappiest couple in the history of the world, on our way to pick up the children, Roland and Bessie. I don't know why, but I had just assumed that the kids would one day appear at the estate, maybe stuffed inside a giant wood crate, packing peanuts pressed against their rickety bodies. I thought I'd just take them in my arms and place them in our new home, like dolls in a dollhouse. But no, we had to go on a road trip. 6 fucking hour road trip. And Carl made it seem like we have to tie them up. Them screaming from the crawl space of some bombed out building. A kind of kidnapping. These children are not used to transitions, he said. They're already dealing with the death of their mother. From what I understand from their grandparents, they've been agitated. Well then, maybe the police should get them, I offered. I hated the way I always tried to get out of hard work, but Jesus, hard work sucked. I had been sleeping on a feather bed and drinking chamomile tea. I wasn't up for snatching some feral kids. No police, he said. That's not what we need right now. That's all we need to be private, a personal matter. We don't want social services or hospital or police. It's just you and me. It's an easy enough task. What does Madison say? I asked, hoping to gain a reprieve. This is what you're being paid to do, he said, exasperated. You're to take care of these children. So you're coming with me to get them. Once they're here, you can do whatever you think is necessary to keep them safe and happy. What should I wear? I said. I was still in my pajamas, drinking coffee and reading the New York Times, while Mary fried some eggs for me. It was already 10:30 in the morning. It made more sense to go early than the next day. I just wear normal clothes, Carl said. I appreciated that he no longer tried to hide his impatience with me. It meant that I didn't have to hide my irritation with him. Okay, chill out, I told him. After I eat my eggs, we'll leave. I have some granola bars and a thermos of coffee. We need to get going. I already let you sleep in, he said. Mary is still making the eggs, I said. I don't want to waste them. Carl sat down on the bench next to me and leaned forward, whispering, Do you think Mary cares if you don't eat those eggs? Do you think you would hurt her feelings? You're too close to me, I told him, and he seemed to suddenly realize how threatening he might seem to me. That my fucking with him had made him overplay his authority. He got all stiff and embarrassed, and he stood back up. I'll be waiting in the van, he said. Meet me in 10 minutes. Should we sync our watches, I asked, but I don't think he heard me because he was already in the hallway. I stood up and went over to the kitchen. Mary, not saying a single word, set a plate of fried eggs in front of me, and I ate them so quickly it was like they hadn't ever existed. Thank you, Mary, I said, and she nodded. Safe travel, she said, and she allowed just the slightest musical in her normal monotone voice. I love how expertly bitchy she was. I wanted to study her for a year. Now we were almost to the vacation home, where James's mother and father were keeping the children out of sight. From what Carl told me, the Cunningham family had long been a political force in East Tennessee, but not long after Jane's marriage to Jasper, her father, Richard Cunningham, had been implicated in some complex Ponzi scheme and pretty much lost the entire family fortune in Lidgington. Jasper had kept him out of jail, but the Cunninghams were ruined. Underrated Richards sold blue-green algae door to door, some kind of superfood that sounded like it only kind of Ponzi scheme. Sounded like its own kind of Ponzi scheme. But there still had this vacation home near the Smoky Mountains, which was where they were watching over the children. Carl indicated that all they did was sit around while the kids splashed in the pool for hours at a time, occasionally calling them inside to eat fish sticks. I figured that for distraction, Jasper was going to pay them a timid sum. There was an entire industry that had sprung up around these children. As Carl tried to navigate the unmarked back roads, I grew antsy. "Were you in the military, Carl?" I asked him. He turned his head and sunglasses, reflecting an image right back to me. He stopped at an empty four-way intersection and actually waited 5 seconds before continuing. He was probably in his late 40s, lean but not handsome, his nose too big and his hair thinning. He was short, too, but there was an interest about him that made up for it. That the way he accepted his ugliness, which was kind of virtue. "No," he finally said. "I'm not military." "Did you used to be a cop?" I asked. "No," he said. "Well, what did you do before you worked for Jasper Roberts?" I asked, not willing to give up until I understood the man a little better. "Different things," he said. "I worked for the newspaper as a junior reporter, and then I sold insurance, and then I got a license to be a private investigator. I was good at it, discreet, and I started running in politics circles. And I did some work for Jasper, looked into the life of someone of his interest to him, and I did a good job, I guess. He hired me to work for him full time." "Do you like working for him?" I asked. "It's better than running down deadbeat dads," he said. "I grew up in a rough place. Sometimes I feel so far from there that it seems like I must have done the right thing." "I grew up in a rough place too," I said, suddenly feeling tenderness for Carl, shocked that he had actually confided in me. I knew that we were nothing alike. He was too buttoned up, too afraid to fuck up. I'm sure he thought I was a disaster, waiting to happen, a problem that he was going to have to constantly manage. But for a moment, I could see him. He was good at his job, even if that job probably sucked. He handled things. You could depend on him. "Oh, I know all about you," he said, and then he turned back into a starched suit, the way his tense jaw. "So, okay, we wouldn't be best friends after all. Fine with me. Where the fuck is this house?" he said, and looked around, and he made a quick U-turn. We finally pulled up to a cabin with all kinds of strange windows, the shapes of it a triangle, and the front door was wide open. "Oh, Jesus," Carl said, removing his sunglasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. "Do I just stay here in the van?" I asked. "Like, please, just let me stay in the van." Carl got out and opened the side door and retrieved a cooler that was stocked with bottles of what looked like Kool-Aid and bars of Hershey's chocolate. I was kind of upset that all I had the whole road trip was some dusty granola bars and weak coffee, when there was this cachet of sugar. "The juice is laced with a sedative," he said. "It'll make things easier if we can get them to drink at least one of them on the drive home." "We're going to drug them?" I asked. "Don't start, please," Carl said. "We're sedating them mildly. They are in a fragile state." "Then why didn't Jasper come get them? I mean, he's their dad. That would calm them down." "I don't know that would," Carl admitted, "and Senator Roberts has work in D.C. right now. This is your job, you and me." "Well, I don't want to drag them," I said. "That seems bogus." "Have it your way," he said. "Let's go." We walked into the cabin, which was dark, not a single light on, but we could see activity in the backyard. The sofa, some flowery abomination with plastic covering it, was burned black on one side, the ceiling above it dusted with soot. Carl slid open the glass door and saw Mr. Cunningham in a tiny swimsuit and some flip-flops, cooking a steak on a rickety old charcoal grill. His wife was dead asleep in the lawn chair. "Carl," Mr. Cunningham said. He was in his 70s, but he had curly gray hair like a wig. He looked like he was in progress of melting, his skin sunburned and sagging everywhere, hanging in folds. He had a huge dimple in his chin. "What are you doing there, Mr. Cunningham?" Carl asked, adopting a very friendly tone. "Living the life, Mr. Cunningham," he said. "Cooking a steak." "Looks good," Carl replied. "Well, a man can't live entirely on blue-green algae, Carl," Mr. Cunningham continued. "Steak is a kind of superfood, I suppose." "The kids in the pool?" Carl asked. "Been there since this morning," he told us. "They like the water. Jane, couldn't swim, but she made sure the kids knew how. That's the kind of mom that she was, giving her kids what she didn't have." "She was an amazing woman," Carl replied, "if Jasper hadn't fucked everything up." But then Mr. Cunningham simply looked at his steak, which was sizzling, popping, just a single steak on the grill. "He's going to take care of these kids," Carl reassured the man, but Mr. Cunningham wasn't listening. "You have a check for me?" Mr. Cunningham finally asked. Carl handed over the cashier's check and then looked over at Mrs. Cunningham. "Would she like to say goodbye to the kids?" he asked. "Let her sleep," Mr. Cunningham said. "Is their stuff packed up?" Carl asked. "It was the kids' responsibility," Mr. Cunningham said. "I don't believe they ever did it. They're not entirely responsible children." Carl looked distinguished, but simply nodded. Carl looked disgusted, but simply nodded. "Okay," he told me. "I'm going to get their stuff together. You wait here with Mr. Cunningham, and then we'll get these kids to head home." "I kind of want to go see them," I asked. "Well, just wait a few minutes like an adult, and then you can meet them," Carl said, and then he was off. Mr. Cunningham didn't even seem to notice me. I don't know who he thought I was. "What does blue-green algae do for you?" I asked him. He wouldn't look at me, but he replied, "Everything, dear." We sat in silence for a few minutes, his wife snoring, and then I said, "I'm going to go and say hi to the kids. I need time apart from Carl, so the kids would understand that I wasn't some narc, so I could hypothesize with them with my own weirdness." "Suit yourself," he said. As I walked to the edge of the pool, I realized that the sounds of splashing had stopped. The kids, their faces obscured by giant goggles, were standing in the shallow end, the water lapping against them. It looked like they were staring at me, but with goggles it was hard to tell. It was a little spooky, truthfully. I worked up I, I was working up this Mary Poppins kind of attitude, and the goggles were throwing me off. "Hey guys, I said, kind of casual cool, the tone where you act like you already know somebody so they don't be curious. Beside Bessie and Rollins, right?" I was in agonizing slow motion. The two of them began to slip beneath the surface of the water. They didn't swim away, just sat there holding their breath while I stood over them, my arms hanging at my sides. I didn't feel anything like Mary Poppins. That bitch. I needed a prop, some magic umbrella that played music or something. I wasn't counting, but it felt like they were under there for a good minute or so before they both stood back up as if they'd thought I'd left. "Bessie and Rollins, right?" I asked, like maybe they just hadn't heard me. "Who are you?" Bessie asked. "Can you take those masks off?" I asked them. "I want to see what you look like." "We're ugly," Bessie said. "I doubt that," I said, but I was probably true. Our green, our eyes get red in this chlorine," Bessie said. "Pop, pop, like just dumps in these chemicals. He doesn't measure them or anything." "Do you want to come out?" I asked. I figured I had a few more minutes before Carl came back with their stuff and fucked everything up. As a kid, I had a lot of experience getting alley cats to trust me. I didn't do much with their trust, just gave them some scraps of food and light petting. It was all about getting them to come to me. I thought kids were much different from cats. "We're not leaving the pool," Bessie said. She had on a black t-shirt and some swim trunks. Her haircut was severe, kind of like a bowl cut if you didn't have the bowl make it uniform. She was sunburned, but not painfully. Her brother was crouched a little behind her, hiding from me. I figured if I could get Bessie on my side, Roland would come along. We have a pool at our place, I told them, bigger than this one. Does it have a slide? Bessie asked, suddenly curious. 2 slides, I lied. Do you have flippers? She asked, Roland nudging her. Pop says no flippers. I'll buy you flippers, I said. You want us to come with you? Bessie asked. Yes, come see our place. It's nice. It's a nice place. I'll think you like it. I think you'll like it. I like it, I said. Now I was kneeling at the edge of the pool. I put my fingers in the water and felt how warm it was. You're going to take care of us? Bessie asked. With questions, she moved a little closer, leaving Roland out there by himself. It's so if that's okay with you, I asked. It sounds okay, Bessie said, trying not to sound too excited. 2 slides? 2 of them, I said, smiling. Bessie took off her goggles, and Roland did the same. They have crazy green eyes, emerald and shiny. Even in the sun, I could see them. Without the goggles, I could figure out their faces. I was a little surprised by how round they were. I had expected fire children to be tin and lanky, the fire burning all the weight off them. But these, but these kids still had baby fat. They looked like kids who hadn't been taken care of, a little wobbly and weird. But here comes Bessie right to the edge of the pool, wanding over to me. Are you going to take care of us? She asked. Someone great, I said. Where are you going to take care of us? She asked. Somewhere great, I said. Is our dad going to be there? She asked. Sometimes, I said, wondering if that was the wrong thing to say. Help me out, she said, holding out her arm like a baby. I leaned forward to reach for her, and she slightly altered her posture. I watched her whole body turn electric and wild, and she grabbed my right arm by the wrist and pulled me in the and put and pulled my entire hand into her mouth. She bit down so hard on my hand that I screamed with such force that she sound just disappeared. The kind of pain where time stops. I looked at Bessie, my hand still wriggling around in her mouth, and she looked at me like she was smiling. I fell into the pool, and Bessie held my head under water, yanking my hair, scratching like crazy at my face. The alley cats from my youth had nothing on this wild, psychotic kid. I popped my head up and heard Bessie screaming, Run, Roland! And I saw his form hop out of the water like he'd been shot from a cannon. He was running for the fence, but I was back under the water, Bessie clawing, digging into the skin in my corner of my right eye, ripping at my cheek. I tried to grab her to get some purchase on her squirrely body, slick from weeks in the pool, and she bit me again, and I felt like her tooth had cracked one of my knuckles. I made it back to the surface, and I could see blood spitting into the water, riding the chlorine. Shit, Roland, get out of here, she cried out, and I heard Carl screaming. What the fuck is going on? I had swallowed so much water, but I finally managed to get my arms around Bessie's waist, her legs kicking out in front of her, while I held on behind. She was scratching at my interlocked fingers, but I wasn't going to let go. Bessie, for fuck's sake, I'm going to be your best friend, I said, and I sounded so punny and windy and like the fucking jerk. I hated myself. And then suddenly I realized how hot Bessie was, even in the water, the heat rising and reddening her skin, turning it almost purple. That there was so much steam coming out of her, I panicked, I guess, so I pulled her under the surface of the water. I counted to 15, then 30, felt heat recade from her skin, hoping I hadn't killed her. I lifted her up, carrying her to the steps. She went limp in my arms and had given up. Where's Roland? She asked. Did he get away? I sat on the stairs, still holding her, and we looked over at Roland, who had tried to hop the fence and gotten snagged by his swim trunks, his pale white butt showing while he hung upside down. Carl muttering, bullshit, as he tried to free the fabric from the fence. I'm not coming with you, Bessie shouted, and she found some hidden strength inside her, pulling free from my arms, and she started to run from the house. I grabbed her ankle and she fell hard, skinning her knee. Her shirt started smoking and the fabric sliding along the neckline. seizing on around the neckline, but it was soaking wet and couldn't really catch fire. I realized there were delicate waves of yellow flame moving up and down Bessie's little arm, and then, like a crackling light, she burst fully into flames, her body a kind of firework, the fire white and the blue and red at all once. It was beautiful, no lie, to watch a person burn. I heard Carl shout, and I turned to see Roland now on fire, though not as bright as his sister. Carl simply kicked him into the pool, where he fell like a rock, extinguishing. I saw Mr. Cunningham holding a giant fork for safety. Mrs. Cunningham was still asleep. "You want to stay here?" I shouted back at Bessie. My hand was hurting so bad, the kind of pain where I didn't even want to look at it, because I knew how fucking angry it would make me, how many times I would travel to think about all the ways I could have kept my finger from being bitten off by some feral children. "You want to stay with those old people who are boring and you probably don't even know what things you like?" "No," she said. Her skin was turning back to normal shade, the fire already flickering out. It seemed like their bodies could only sustain the fire for a brief moment. Her shirt was in tatters, almost ash. "Or do you want to be with me because I'm cool, and I keep being cool, and you'll like hanging out with me?" I just kept on going, didn't even wait for her to respond. "You want to stay here with your shitty grandparents and never get fed us and scratch bug bites underneath sheets that hadn't even been washed? You want that?" "No, I don't want that," Bessie said, not crying, but wheezing from anger. "Or do you want to come with me, and I'll take care of you and buy you all new clothes, and I'll feed you whatever you want, and play games with you, and watch movies with you, and swim in the pool with you, and rock you to bed, and kiss you goodnight, and sing you lullabies, and then when you wake up, and let you watch cartoons?" "That," she said, with her teeth clattering. "We want that." "Okay, then," I said. "Then you have to trust me. I'm going to take care of you. It's going to be weird, okay? It's going to make you angry sometimes, but I'll take care of you. It's what I'm going to do." By this point, Carl had fished Roland out of the pool, and was carrying him over to us. The boy was listening intensely. "Are you our stepmother?" Roland asked. "No, Jesus Christ, no. I'm not your stepmother. She's like a babysitter that never leaves," Carl said. "Never?" Bessie and Roland said at the same time, and I realized this could go bad so quickly. "Never," I said, smiling. Bessie still had a little trail of my blood running down her chin. "We catch on fire," Bessie told me. "I know," I said. "It's okay." "We just go with you?" she asked, and I nodded, exhausted. Bessie looked at Roland, who simply nodded his assent. "We'll go with you," they both said at the same time. "I packed up your belongings," Carl told them. Roland shrugged. "We don't have that much stuff to bring," the boy informed us. He had striped buzzes into his sides of his hair, and I was shocked to realize that their hair was unsinged. I know that why these demon children bursting into flames right in front of me, their bad haircuts remaining intact, was the magic that fully amazed me. But that's how it works, I think. The big thing is so ridiculous that you absorb only the smaller miracles.